Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks YouTube channel slash podcast where I, your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn, I speak to film creators around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Mekhai Lee to talk about his new short film, Them That's Not, which is going to be showing at the 2020. Yes, 2026. I have to remind myself what year we're in. the 20 the 2026 South by Southwest International Film Festival. And this short film is a really beautiful short film about this young woman, Drea, who goes to a repast, as it's called in the South in America, but a
Mhm.
wake, as we would call it in the Caribbean where I'm from, for her
Mhm.
grandmother Muriel, who has passed. And Drea is hard of hearing, and this creates some interesting uh dynamics in her family and the story that's going around, because it's about isolation, familial isolation, but I think also isolation as a disabled person in a family that doesn't quite know how to navigate around a disabled person. And it talks about grief and familial disconnect and all these things. I'm so very happy to be able to talk to Mekhai about this film. But first of all, thank you for joining me today. Yay.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you about it as well. I didn't realize that they were called wakes in the Caribbean. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. In the Caribbean, we call them wakes. I don't know why, because the person,
Yeah.
you
Maybe
know,
there's the hope that they'll wake up. That's what comes to mind. So,
possibly, because I think they're called wakes in the Caribbean because like in Barbados in particular, Barbados was colonized by the British, and by through slavery, a lot
mhm.
of their customs were integrated into like West African customs. I think they're called wakes in England as well, and in
Okay.
Europe as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
but I know in America they're called the repass, and
Yes, the
everything.
repast. That's right.
Yeah. And but before we begin talking a little bit about them, that's I want to talk a bit just about you yourself as a filmmaker and a writer,
Sure.
like how you got interested in filmmaking. Because this isn't your first project. You have another web series
That's
called For
right.
the Boys, which is about it's a queer LGBTQ story about young
That's
black
right.
men.
Yeah. Oh, you
So
did
talk
your
to me about your
research.
yes, I did my research.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. I actually got my start in the arts and theater. I started in performing and very at a very young age, high school, middle school, all those things. I went to university for it, and then graduated from university and went on my first national tour with The Color Purple. That sort of began my professional artistic career, and then consequently moved to New York. Started to do the whole Broadway thing. This is all before the pandemic, and during the year, all during that time of writing and wanting to write, wanting to create, and meeting a lot of different artists who sort of inspired that notion in me. And I was in a position in 2020, once the pandemic happened. Broadway essentially shut down, and we had a lot of time on our hands, a lot of extra funds on our hands, and just we were just bored. We had nothing to do. So I connected with a good friend of mine who was also a performer, wanting to be a writer, Ellis Dawson, and we started to work on making our friends' lives, our lives, a sort of series that we could watch. We weren't seeing a series like that in television. We wanted to have something that felt closer to our own experience. And For the Boys came of that. We cast completely from all of our friends, like people we were hanging out with. All of those stories that exist in that were things we would imagine could happen to us or actually happen to one of us or to some of our friends. And it was so fun. It was just really fun series to make. We did it for, I mean, a shoestring and a prayer, like no money at all, really. Just kind of like on the wing and the whim of just wanting to make something and having the time on our hands. And it really came to be something beautiful. The show sort of sparked its own life, and it certainly bit me with the director bug, and I got experience having wanted to be behind the camera for some time. That was the first time I was able to sort of, cut my teeth at it. I trained theatrically for so long, and I'm classically trained. So from a narrative structure, I do feel like I have an appreciation and a knowledge when it comes to how to approach story structure. But the technical aspects were all new to me. They're still new to me. And I was able to sort of like learn that in the beginning on For the Boys a bit. Um, Yeah, and for the boys, just it was just a lot of fun to make that show. Like we had a great time. But from there, I realized that I had a lot to learn. So I sort of started to work at, on different sets. And, I had representation come from for the boys. And that representation was able to support me in getting various apprenticing jobs and, like, learning from directors, television directors, film directors, the whole nine. And I was constantly applying for grants from different fests, from different organizations, institutions, and just always, always, always hearing no. Um, and then I came across the Concord Sound and Scene grant, sponsored by Concord and supported by New Fest Film Festival. And For the Boys played at New Fest Film Festival, so that's sort of how I was affiliated, or I knew of them. And I submitted for the grant. And the initiative was to build your film around a song, you know.
Mm.
And the song that I applied for was God Bless the Child. That was one of the songs sort of being given. They were giving away the rights to 5 songs to implement it into your story, and it had to be a part of the DNA. And timing is crazy because the morning that I had that opportunity presented to me, my grandmother actually passed away. And so I'm not even in the town that she's in when she dies. So there was this initial sort of meetup call, interest call to see if you're interested in this grant. And I was just barely present for that. And I thought to myself, oh God, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to submit anything or come up with anything because I'm just grieving. And I went to her bedside. She was laying in the hospital bed. And I just knew in that moment that everything I was feeling and everything our family was feeling, and that isolation that grief can sort of put you in, it just felt like I needed that cathartic piece of art to sort of bring me out of that. And I also knowing my grandmother, that she would not want me to wallow in despair and not do anything with what I was feeling, specifically artistic, knowing how artistic I am. And so I applied everything I was going through in that moment to an original idea. And the thematic sentiment of the song God Bless the Child is one of hyper individualism, stark independence. And I was learning in that moment, real time, that I could not rely on myself to get through my grief alone, you know? And while that is championed in that song, I sort of wanted to subvert the meaning of that what she sings is God bless the child who's got their own, right? And our own doesn't have to be everything we hold to ourselves or just us alone and what we hold dear. It can be our own sister, our own brother, our own community, our chosen family, like what we designate that belongs to us and what we belong to, and that sort of reciprocal, tender sort of love that you can share with another human being or a group of human beings is what is our own and what is actually the most tangible thing we can hold on to. And I wanted to make a film that represented that. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that because there's some interesting themes and connections in the film that we'll definitely
okay,
talk
cool.
about. But I want to talk just a bit about because as a stage actor yourself, right? As a stage actor working on a show like Color Purple, and The Color Purple is a story about Black grief in
Yeah,
many ways.
yeah.
It is a story.
Yes, resilience in the face of grief, but
Resilience,
after learning, you have to
right?
have
And
that.
also community in grief, like learning to
That's
fight
right.
community
Yeah,
in grief,
yeah,
because when you think
definitely.
about it, like all the characters there's different types of grief. So not grief just in death, in someone dying, but also grief of the loss of relationships, grief of
That's
broken
right.
hearts,
Yeah.
grief of sisters losing each other, and learning how to reconnect and all of these different things. So that is a story about all of these different facets of Black the Black experience in America. But again, like all when it comes to grief is universal. It sounds so paltry to say, but it is true. All of these are issues that people experience all over. But I wanted to ask you about which character did you play
in Color Purple?
Yeah.
I played Grady. So if you know the movie or the musical very well, Suge Avery gets married again, and she comes home with a new husband, and both Mr. and Celie are pretty upset about it. I was
Yeah.
that new husband.
I okay.
Suge Avery was always going for somebody younger. So she
Yeah.
comes back and she's like a singer now, and
Mhm.
she's married to Grady, and then Grady runs off with Squeak, if you know the characters in Color Purple. So
Yes, it was
yeah, the end of
phenomenal.
the show, I'm like coming hand in hand with Squeak just to sort of show that like Grady and Squeak end up together. Like
Yeah,
that's how
they're
that
like,
that's
he's
how
like,
that's
you know what? I moved on. He's like, I moved on. I have speak now.
exactly, exactly. Grady is also in that famous dinner scene, the "To You Do Right by Me" scene. Like Grady's there, he's
So
the
you do right by me, you never.
yes, that's right, that's right. Yeah, so I was in the stage production, of course, but yeah, I was on that stage every night doing that scene, and then
Right.
Sophia's famous laugh. Your black audience will know this one. They'll
For
know
sure.
this one.
But the reason I asked about that is not because of the themes of grief, but everything, but just like how your experience as a stage actor
Mm.
influences your direction. And the reason I asked that is
Ooh.
because Them That's Not has a very interesting style of direction where the camera moves through the spaces. It moves through the spaces as Drea, who's played by Angel Theory,
Mm-hmm.
as this person who's drifting in and out of all of these spaces because she doesn't really feel like she belongs. So she's an observer just moving through.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
the camera moves through almost like as a separate person observing everything.
Yes.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
and your let me see, your DP's name is I have it here.
Sade.
Sade Nadia.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about working with Sade and figuring out how you wanted this film to look from a director's perspective. Because the reason I asked again about your stage experiences is how that influences you as a director. Because as an actor on stage, you're
Yeah.
moving through you have to move through the space so that you're always seen by the audience. You're always present
Yeah,
with the audience
definitely.
and in the space.
Um, I think the most influential part from my stage experience in my directing is the collaborative effort it takes to bring a theatrical production to life.
Mm.
Devising theater is so specific, building a character from nothing, from table read to rehearsal to tech week or tech weeks to opening nights and previews and things like that. It takes work. And then also, if you've had the luxury to do a show for a long time, your show and your character changes as you continue to work. Every audience is different. Another art form that can really relate to this is comedy, stand-up comedy. It's in the moment. So I think that a lot of my directing style is is derivative of that and driven towards that. In film, it's interesting because your job is to capture that moment, but how do you build up to that? And I think a lot of the times, this is no shade to other filmmakers, I think every film is valid and worthy, but I think a lot of times films suffer in that. It's all about capturing the picture, and I think your picture, your spectacle should be sort of very important, but maybe a little lower on the list when your primary objective should to be capture that moment. Understand the moment that you're trying to encapsulate. Because it is organized chaos. It is a falsehood to an extent, but maintaining that truth is the most important thing. So I think that's what really comes from theater for me. And when I'm approaching my directing, a lot of folks like to call me an actor's director, and I definitely feel that way because I was one time one of them. And I think that there is a little bit of a shorthand when it comes to speaking to actors for me because I remember what it felt like to be that. And a lot of the times the actors I'm directing at this stage in my career are actors that I've worked with, like have acted with, so it's a give and take. I feel like when I'm working with actors, I'm not telling them what to do with the role. We're collaborating on the role. You know what I mean? They are inhabiting the space and the character, but we're trying to find it together. So very often in my directing out, actors will suggest something to me, and if I agree with the choice, I say go for it. And if I'm not liking it, we'll do another take and we'll try something different. But I'm always open to see what an actor brings because their input on the characters is massively important, as important as mine is, especially from a writing perspective for me. And then with Sade, it's so interesting because I feel like Sade really was perfect in covering all of the technical aspects that I had less experience in. You know, she was so supportive of my vision, but was also additive to it. You know, she was able to expound upon things that I was sort of already thinking about. One moment in particular I'm thinking of is when we're on like day 3, our final day, and we're running out of time. And I knew we had a few more shots and scenes to get. And so I was sort of like, okay, Sade, like this is the last thing, where she was doing like close-ups of Biko's face from Biko's playing Samuel's face from Drea's perspective. And I was like, okay, I'm looking at monitor, like, okay, I think we got it. She was like, and she looked at me and was like, you're gonna want this. Let's just do the whole scene. Let's just do the whole scene. You're gonna want all of this. And I'm so glad she told me to do that, because I could see in her eyes that there was no disagreeing with her in that moment. But also I was kind of like, all right, she might be right. She might be right. Let me back down. Okay, cool. I'll just watch monitor. And even though I know we're cutting short on time, something else has to go. Something that I don't even remember what that scene was. We had to cut it. Don't even remember what it is. But what I know I'm glad I have is all of that footage of Biko, because we had a multitude of options to work with. And it really has informed the emotive quality of that last moment in the film, you know, that would not exist if Sade didn't, you know, force my hand there. So she was, from her experience shooting all the time, she's a really booked and blessed DP. She's just brilliant at what she does, and everyone who works with her knows this. There's a massive amount of respect for her in the industry, and she was really great at, you know, bringing that to our set, but also remaining humble about it, and, you know, approaching the idea from the idea's perspective. You know, like, idea was king, and it was never about ego with her or anything like that. It was just always like, listen, you want the best film possible, and trust me to make that happen with you, you know? So it was a beautiful, again, collaboration, which is derivative from my theatrical background. And it was a partnership with her, you know, really finding what the vision could be like visually, because you're absolutely right that there was fly on the wall moments, and there's also Drea's perspective moments. And that's intentional. That's super intentional. And Sade did a brilliant job of capturing it, because all I had to do was tell her what I wanted to see, and she did it, you know?
Yeah. You said like this you said something interesting, and it's about there's directors who, like, you can tell when they're very focused on getting the picture.
Yeah.
And that's something that has been noticed particularly the last few years, where a lot of films and even shows are filmed like they're meant to catch specific pictures and things. And when we were saying that, we were talking specifically things to do with social media, memes, you know, gifs. Like, you can tell when something these days is filmed like the studio, and a lot of it has to do with the studios. The studios like, we want this show to go viral, we want this moment to go viral, so that people tweet about it, make gifs about it, and that's our promotional material. So like, they're filmed very vertically, or very, the shots aren't wide, they're like, you know, super honed in on the actors. And there's a sense of just like over composition to it, but yet still very simplistically shot, where we're not getting anything in details from what's happening. And I mentioned that because like what you said, it is true. Like, there's some films and you watch them and like it's so beautiful and everything, but you're also like, you're always like, but what is this? Is
what is
But I'm watching, I'm like, but what is this scene telling me? What am I supposed to get from it? It's a beautiful shot, but what do I get from this beauty? You know, and like and so like, in juxtaposition for that, like, your film, like, again, like, none of first of all, there's not many still shots. And when I said there's not many still shots, is that because Dre is always moving through the space, like, she's never really actually static, because she's so uncomfortable. She's always like shifting from one place to another,
sort of floating around the party,
so the camera never really stays in one position too long. And that makes the film feel very fluid, almost kind of, they almost dream, like, you know, like Dre isn't actually here in this space. And
I like that word, fluid. I really appreciate that. That's
like, it kind of, it's the film, the camera feels like it's just floating through the scene, and it feels almost very dreamy and almost slightly surrealistic.
Intentional,
right. And I love films that are like that. And like, one of my favorite films that I've seen this year is Hamnet. I watched Hamnet, and like, that film is so gorgeously shot.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Chloe Zhao, she's incredible. She can do no wrong. She's great.
it's so gorgeously shot, and he's saying like that there's so many beautiful shots, and all of the shots mean something.
Yes.
Like they're not pretty just for the sake of pretty. Like there's a story being told in each shot and in each
sure.
And there's films that I watch and I'm like, I get nothing. But I mentioned Hamnet because like your film and what I'm talking about Hamnet is like everything is intentional, but like we the audience are getting something from it, and I feel like there's so many films and products being made where I'm not getting that. Where it's like I'm always like by the end I'm left cold. I'm like I can move on. Like, it doesn't stay with me.
Indifferent. It's so interesting you're mentioning this because I was having this conversation a few days ago with another artist friend of mine, and this is going to get really nerdy, but nerdy. Yeah. Okay. So Aristotle has 6 rules of tragedy. And this is something we study in theater history, and we really extensively studied it in college, and we applied it to plays like Hamlet, which to talk about Hamnet, and then Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. And the order is plot, character, themes, diction or dialogue, song, like the lyrical quality of what you're speaking of, and then spectacle. Spectacle's last on the list. It doesn't mean it's less important or unnecessary. It's important to think about the scale and scope of what you're creating, or even how it is appreciated, how it's taken in visually. But it is last on that list for a reason. Your plot, your character, and your themes are the most important thing. That's what is left with your audience when they walk away from your piece, And when you leave those things to the wayside, your piece lacks depth, Now, I don't mean to profess that I'm an expert or a connoisseur of this sort of thing, but the studying aspect of all that is very important to me. And so when I approach my work, that's the first thing I'm thinking of is just like, okay, like the plot has to mean something, and that has to be completely supported by the characters that inhabit the space and thematical elements that I want to approach with this, And with them, that's not thematically. It was clearer to me at first, but I was able to, support that with the plot because of something I was personally experiencing, So my plot fully came from my life. This plot fully came from what was happening to me and my family. And a lot of the things I was thinking of, like how isolating it can be being the main grieving person in a family of people who weren't necessarily close to the person who passed, or being a queer person in a heteronormative family, or in Drea's instance, being a hard of hearing person in a hearing family. Like that is those are very niche experiences, singular experiences, and I thought it was cool to find connective tissue between the 3 of them. Which in itself, the execution of that is the spectacle, But what's important is thematically the elements that I'm trying to, emulate with the story. So I'm glad you make a point of that because I was just having this conversation like 2 days ago. I swear to God, it's so crazy to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, like for me, plot means so much because I would watch something and I'll be breaking. My sister is always telling me like, you think too much. I'm like, literally, this is
no. You're supposed to. The curtains are blue for a reason. They are blue for a reason. You're supposed to think about it.
I always ask people, does this cup mean something, or is this a cup, or is a cup just a cup? Does it have a different meaning? Like and that's how my brain always works. Yeah. And so like, so sometimes I'll watch something and I'll be like. And at the end, I'm like, what was the point of this? Yeah. Like, what was the point? What was the purpose of this story? What was the purpose of the themes? And like the actors could be acting down the all the technical elements could be there.
Yeah.
But if the plot makes no sense, I'll be like, what? Why? What is happening? Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then there's other times when you can have too much plot, where you have all of this exposition, all the characters just feeding the audience everything because the filmmakers don't trust the audience enough to catch what they're saying, to understand, and that's another the same way how so many things are being like shot for a very particular reason, like social media and everything is being shot to be looked at on a phone. Something else that's becoming very, very prevalent in especially in Hollywood now, and I'm finding it leaking into Asian suffering dramas in particular. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
the characters are spelling out everything for the audience. You know, like you're not trusting
Yeah.
the audience to be smart enough, to be emotionally intelligent enough, to be critical thinkers to figure out what are you telling me. And I love for like this film, you're not spelling everything out for the audience. Like there's actually very little dialogue in this film. Like most of
Mm-hmm.
everything that we're being told comes through how Drea is moving through the space and how Angel is performing, all of the
Mm-hmm.
nuances between her interactions between her and the cousins and her Aunt Carol and her dad, you know, like when she goes into Muriel's space, her grandmother's space, we see how
Mm-hmm.
much she cares about Muriel because of the way she touches like the
The
things and the way she
nameplate. Yeah.
looks. So
Mm-hmm.
like you don't have the characters saying, we know how much you cared about grandma. That no one needs to say that because we see that in the performance, you know, we see it in the little things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate a film like this where you say the things that need to be said and then the things that don't need to be explained, you leave for the audience to figure out. And you leave it for
Mm.
the and you leave it up to the cinematography, you leave it up to the music, you leave it up to the sound design. The sound design in this film is really good, which is
Thank you. Thank
which
you.
is
Yeah.
which is especially important for a film where you have characters who are deaf or hard of hearing. You know,
That's right.
like Angel, she wears the hearing aids. You know, so but they
Mm-hmm.
don't give her like 100% audio ability. You know, they give her
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit. She hears more that she's
Well,
underwater.
it's so interesting you say that because while we were on set that day, Angel actually gave me the hearing aid to listen to,
Hmm.
and what it is that it gives 100% of audio quality. But that means like when we're talking to each other, our brain knows to focus in on the words coming out of our mouths. But if I move something or if I'm eating and you hear the scraping of the fork on the plate, we are able to tune those like ambient noises out. You know, hearing aids pick it all up 100% of the time, so it comes all in. You know, and it's hard to decipher. You know, I remember one time I was having coffee with Angel, and they were forced to read my lips pretty much the whole time because we were in a very like busy place. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And she's like trying to follow what I'm saying, but is hearing everything, you know. So it's just it is a common misconception because I thought the same thing that it's that they're not getting everything, but it's the inverse of that. It's that they are getting everything, you know. So they're unable to sort of like hone in and focus, which is why often Angel just removes them, and it's something that she incorporated into the character because that when she's overwhelmed with the world or the world is not meeting her on her terms, she just takes them out. You know, it's a serenity thing, and it's something she brought to Drea. So.
Mm. Actually, so that's something why I was going to ask you about. I'm going to ask you about that now because there,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I was here trying to look at it because there's another film that I did an interview for last year. It was a Taiwanese film, and it's about a main character who is also hard of hearing. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not just a main character. It's about a group of um, deaf and hard of hearing young people living in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that's interesting that's done in the film is it shows like the different levels of audio ability between the characters. Like some are profoundly deaf, so there is absolutely
No sound.
some
Mm-hmm.
have limited hearing, and some
Mm-hmm.
like the main character she uses hearing aids, but her hearing aids don't pick up 100% of the sound because it's a cochlear implant. So the reason
Mm-hmm.
so here you say that for Angel's hearing aids that they pick up 100% of the sound. That's interesting to me because in the audio design of the film, that's not what we hear. Her hearing, what she's hearing through is sometimes muffled.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about that, the choice to change it in the film from what Angel herself hears with the hearing aids that they use
Yeah.
versus what the
Well,
character of Drea has.
they operate a lot like a volume button. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of older people were hearing aids. You know, so if it's low, it's going to feel a little distant. But
Yeah,
what
my
I
dad has
mean,
one.
yeah, yeah,
And he always take and my sister always like, Dad, do you have your hearing aid? He's like, no. I'm like, what?
exactly. But sometimes the silence is preferred. You know, um, but
But he
no,
be
yeah. So
watching the TV and he not paying attention. And he's like, oh, I just have the TV on for the sake of it. I'm like,
yeah,
I didn't want to
right,
argue what was on the TV.
right, right, right. but they do operate like with a volume switch, you know. So when it came to the character, a lot of the time, like if you notice in the first scene of the film, she turns them up, you know, and it's still picking up everything. So the reason things are muffled is because when it does capture all of that sound like that, Angel was having this experience on set. Actually, they have to turn it down because it can give you a headache. It's like
Yeah.
very overwhelming from a hearing perspective. So unfortunately, you are very reliant on reading lips to really decipher out what people are saying, especially in a room full of people like this film is, or if someone's really far away and they're dealing with plates and cups and silverware and things like that, you know. So in those moments, those were specific times that it was important to incorporate how hard it is for her to follow the conversation, whether it be because there's a bunch of people or because someone's mouth is full or because Drea looks away for a moment, or even because people are just setting a table and you're here, and we as an audience are taking for granted the fact that a plate just landed on the table, and then a fork and a cup and napkins and the flow of a tablecloth and things like that. We're taking that sound as ambient noise, and she has to turn her hearing aid down to be able to follow the conversation, and still is having trouble doing so, which is why it was important to include the subtitles to show what she's, you know, keeping up with and what she's not, you know, and just to show again that that language barrier is getting in the way of her connection with the family that already has trouble connecting to her, you know.
Mhm.
So that was really important. And I think it was one of the, there's always like a moment, a spark in an idea when I'm like, okay, I want to do that idea. And when I had the moment of like, we as an audience are in her head and struggle to follow the conversations too, that's when I knew that this film was one I wanted to make, you know, because that singular experience, that specificity of experience made it exciting to sort of tell that story, you know. So
Yeah. And I can relate a little bit to that because I myself I have a little bit of hearing loss in my left ear because I have tinnitus. I have tinnitus. I have MS, so it's affected a little my hearing a little bit. So
yeah,
like I do get the tinnitus where like you get like this high pitched sound out of nowhere and it kind of goes
yeah.
in and out and then like it becomes muffled and then it kind of like expands.
Mm.
And so I related a little bit to that, like how like yeah, the sound can go overwhelm, can be either be overwhelming or it's like I always compare it to being underwater. Oh, you're underwater,
Yeah,
you can still hear what's going on above, but it sounds kind of muffled. So that's
yeah,
why I think like your sound designer did a really great job in
she
getting
did.
that because
She
not a lot
did.
of people, even for other films that I watch where like there's characters who are deaf and they try to get that, sometimes they don't really quite get the nuances of how that can sound because people think it's just like, oh, like how you cover your ears and that, but it's
No,
not
yeah,
quite like that. It's like
yeah.
there's like nuances to that because I always say the best example is the film Sound of Metal, right? Like what they
What?
did in
Oh
that
my
film.
God! Yes. Well, it's so when you brought up Candace, my sound designer, um, I remember saying Candace was asking me, "Well, how do you hear it? Like, what's the thing?" And I said underwater, and she was like, "Okay, cool." And she made an attempt at it, and it was almost right, but not quite. And then I sent her the comp of Sound of Metal. I was like, "This sound design is perfect. They got it right. Like, this is exactly, you know, it's exactly right." And not only did she end up loving the movie, she killed the sound design for hours. Like she just totally got it. Just clued her in right away. And then she was able to sort of play a little bit with me. And there were a lot of things that were more straightforward until Candace kind of came in with the sound design and started to like, you know, fuss with the levels and, you know, add a heartbeat here or something, or like some sort of pulsing moment, you know, or droning, like slight ringing. You know, there was always like really, really tiny elements in the sound design that Candace was instrumental in including. So yeah, Sound of Metal was North Star. I always tell people when I in the creation of this film, it was Sound of Metal meets The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Those were the two
I
films.
still haven't seen that movie.
It's so good. You gotta watch it. It's so good.
No.
It's
I
really
love
good.
Andre
Check
Holland's
it out.
acting. I know
Check
it.
it out. Check it out. It's really good. It's really good. And you know, Jonathan Majors pre everything, like pre celebrity too, before even, you know, he was doing the big stuff, the Marvels and the Creeds and things. Like it was one of his first roles and
Yeah.
he's fantastic in it. And I also like that movie because there's not many stars in it. The biggest star to me in it is Danny Glover and Tashina Arnold. Um,
Right, yeah.
those are the two people that are the most like notable, not notable, but most famous, I should
Yeah.
say, in the movie. But it's just a brilliant film. It's really just well done.
I know I should watch it because that's the film that really got people's attention about Andre Holland. That's the one that people are like,
Yeah,
"Who's this guy?"
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know I should watch it. But yeah, Sound of Metal. I even had an opportunity to interview the director for Sound of Metal, and I was so happy to get to
Mm,
interview him for that because it was like, "You got it right." I'm like, "You got it right." But
hmm
and another thing about the sound design that I want you to talk a little bit about is where there's the moments where we are in Drea's headspace where she is feeling lost audibly, but she's also feeling
mm,
lost emotionally. And the way how you play with the sound, how you guys decide when the sound is muffled versus when it's like full on audio and we're hearing everything that's going on around her, we're hearing all the conversations. Those
hmm
happen at very particular times.
They
They
do.
happen at times where like people are talking about the family. They're talking about like for instance, they're talking about her and they're saying
hmm
like she's dressed like a boy and like her dad
hmm
is coming. We don't want her dad to
hmm
think that he has a son, when he has a daughter.
Yeah, which
And
I
so
have to I have to shout out the actress who delivers that line, Khadijah. In that scene, it wasn't clear whether or not they were judging her for what she had on or the reason why they were
yeah.
judging her. And that line was not written. And I was talking to them in the rehearsal of it, and I was just like, I just need one more thing that just signifies for the audience that this is the problem. That not that she's wearing it, but that how will her father feel about this return and seeing her and all of that. And Khadijah just ad libbed that line on the spot, and I was just like, mwah, perfect. Thank you so much. Khadijah's incredible. I just got to shout her out because that's a good friend of mine. She's incredible. So
No, they were really funny. Both her
they
and the
were.
other actress who
They're
played
both
the
good
other
friends
aunt
of
were
mine.
funny.
Yeah, yeah, they're incredible.
And the reason why that's those moments really stick out for me is again like we're talking about where Drea is emotionally, how she herself feels, but how we the audience get thrown in and pulled out of specific emotional moments and the
Yeah.
conversations they're having. But I think it also speaks a lot to how when we are in around our families at particular events, we'll be moving through spaces and you don't always hear everything that is being
Mm,
said. And you can misunderstand what people are saying because you missed the beginning of the conversation or you missed the end. Right.
hmm
And the other thing that I think that really makes this film very much, I think, about feeling isolated, even amongst family, is that you feel like an outsider because you don't know how people feel about you as an individual. Like I
hmm
kind of saw it as Drea feeling as an outsider, not only because she's deaf and her family all don't know sign language. They should, because she's a grown woman by now, and none of them,
She's
and
a part of
they're
the
not fluent,
family. Yeah, yeah.
and none of them are fluent in ASL, right? So
Right.
she's isolated that way. But then she feels isolated, like because she feels she's being judged because of the way she's dressed. She feels she's being judged as a queer person, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
she feels, and so I want you to talk about that because like, and then the other thing that I thought was really interesting is there's the scene when she's in the outside with her cousins and they're smoking. In the
hmm
Caribbean, we call it a spliff, but like they're smoking
Yeah.
weed,
Yeah.
and there's a whole thing of puff puff pass. And what I
Yeah.
thought you did was really interesting about this scene is it's they're ignoring her. She's not included in the conversation because no one
hmm
is translating for her. They're not looking at her, so she can't read their lips. But the only time they realize that she's there is when they're not getting this spliff.
The spliff. Yeah.
Then they're like, "Oh wait, you're supposed to give it to us." I'm like, "But you
Yeah.
also weren't giving her the conversation either. So do you really deserve
Right.
it?" So
Yes.
talk about like the moments that you taking and out the
Well,
conversation.
that's a great question, and there's a couple of answers to it. I'm gonna answer the cousin conversation part first because that was completely intentional. There's a few layers in that scene, just because oh, you asked such a good question. I'm excited to talk about it, but it's not necessarily that they're ignoring her. It's just that they've taken for granted her ability to follow the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
As often families can do when you've been around for a long time. Families can take for granted the place you play in their lives. And they've taken for granted who Drea is, how easy she is to follow. She is at following conversations. The first thing that Aunt Carol says to her at the beginning of the film is, you read lips, right? And everyone pretty much has that consensus when it comes to to Drea's character is that she can read lips, she'll be all right. You know what I mean? And no one's really making the effort to communicate on her terms. Rather, they just rather show off the fact that they are offering her food or learned a little bit of the alphabet or something like that, like families tend to do. You know, we placate a bit because we've taken for granted who you are in our lives. So it's just like, let's show you the semblance of love, you know, a like like half-assed sort of version of real genuine understanding and acceptance, instead of making an effort to meet you on your terms and love you in the way that you need to be loved. Often people extend love and grace in the way that they'd like to be loved, and that's not always the same language, another language barrier, speaking of the layers in that scene. And I really enjoy that Angel was, I keep saying Angel because it really is the same person to me, Angel and Drea. But Drea was wanting to be a part of this. This is the one place where she feels like in her family, I actually do have some connection with these people, sharing a split with my cousins. And many Black families know that quintessential walk you take at Thanksgiving, at July 4th, at whatever, you know, funeral, cookout, whatever. Like the cousins that are in your age range are all going to take a walk together, whether you smoke or not. Like it's like you're
Right.
going. You know, it's a rite of passage, and it's always comes after a certain age, probably like 13, 14. You
It's
know,
a very Black thing because we do it in the
it's
Caribbean
a
too. You just go take a
very
walk.
Black thing. That's a very Black thing. And I knew that Black audiences would recognize that moment right away. And what they would immediately recognize is how easy that moment is. There's so much pressure on it when you've never been. But once you've gone a few times, being with your cousins is easy. It's lax. Everybody's smoking is chilling. And these are the people who are supposed to accept you in some families. I know not all, but these are the people who are supposed to accept you, no questions asked. And they do accept Drea. They just accept her on their terms, you know, which is the weird sort of nuance that we have to deal with often in our families. Whether you're an artist, whether you're a poet like Drea is, whether you're queer like Drea is, whether you're hard of hearing like Drea is, all of that was at play in that moment for me. So I'm so glad that you bring to light the fact that, you know, that they are ignoring her, so to speak, because they're not intentionally doing so. Just like Carol's not intentionally trying to hurt her and saying, no, I can't help you, you know, or no, you can't stay here, you know, things like that. It's not an intentional means to harm a family member of mine. It's that my needs come before your needs, even though we are supposed to be community, we are supposed to be family. And it harkens back to God bless the child, the God bless the child who's got their own. And Drea's own right now used to be her grandmother. Her grandmother's passed. Now it's just Drea. So then when you come to the end of the film, the person she's been avoiding this entire party, her father, ends up being the only person who meets her on her terms. That entire scene is done in silence because he knew that in order to connect with my daughter, I have to sign to her. That's the only way she'll hear me, you know? So that was
Yeah.
really the main the biggest inspiration, the biggest reason to tell this story, because families can be so complicated and it's such a fine line to toe, because it's not that these people don't love you, it's not that you don't love them, it's that we just love each other on our own terms, and when we need to be loving the other person on theirs, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And the thing that the film also made me think about is how when it comes to especially disabled people in Black communities and in Black families, we always do this thing where we're like, I accept you as a disabled person.
yeah, yeah,
And it sounds ridiculous saying it, but it is what it is. It's kind of how when people say, I don't see color.
yeah, exactly.
Black
You
people
know,
kind of do the same thing, but with disabilities. They're like,
that's right.
for disability, I know you're disabled, but I don't see it. So I'll
That's not
treat
that.
you like
Yeah,
I
they're not
regularly,
thinking.
like I treat everybody else. And it's like, no, you can't treat me like everybody else because
Yeah.
everybody else is not deaf. Everybody else is not paralyzed. Everybody
That's
else
right.
is not does you know that everybody else is like in my case does not have MS or fibromyalgia. Like there's nuances to how you see me, and I want you to see me and acknowledge that. And so
That's right.
she's like, I love that you guys are trying to speak to me because you know that I read lips. But it would also be great if you would actually put in effort to learn sign language.
To learn sign language. I mean, a simple conversation, you know. And even when I was writing this, I was like, I can't write this and not show up and not know sign language. So I was in ASL classes just to make sure I was meeting Angel and my director of artistic sign language, Alexandria, on their terms. I wanted to be able to sign with them. And they were incredibly gracious and very appreciative of the fact that I was learning, but also patient because I wasn't very good. I learned a little bit, but I knew like colors and stuff like that, toilet, and, random things to say, random phrases that I could string together, and I could like sort of sign stuff, but they were willing to teach me more because I was willing to learn,
Yeah.
and it just opened the playing field. It opened up our rapport. So yeah,
Yeah. So
it was really important for me, to represent that specifically.
yeah, because I'm like, I love Black people, but sometimes be so frustrating. We are so,
Uh-huh.
and
Mm-hmm.
like, and a lot of it is also very paternalistic and like very
Mm-hmm.
patronizing because they're speaking to her also like she was a child as
Yeah.
well. They do this thing like I learned A B, I learned
Yeah. Yep.
A
A, B.
B
Yeah.
C
C.
D E,
Yes.
and
That's
I'm
right.
like, but they're doing it as though they're talking to a child. Being
Mm-hmm.
deaf does not make someone childlike. But people a lot again, people have this idea of like disability as almost having a level of being immature or like childlike, so they speak to you as
Yeah.
though you're a child, like, and it's like, and so like there, like you did cover all of these nuances, and I want to ask you about working with Angel,
Mm.
and like the conversations that you and they had like during the perhaps the audition process, and you mentioned like during the filming, like and they talked about like taking out the hearing aids, but what other conversations did like Angel have about the with regards to the relationships, like her in
A good question. I usually tell the story about the hearing aids, but another thing that was really interesting, and I hope Angel doesn't mind me sharing this, is that Angel doesn't really have a relationship with her own dad like that, So having this relationship with Biko was cathartic for her in a lot of ways. I really hope she doesn't mind me sharing this because she was expressing that when we all first had our first coffee together. Um, and I won't share everything that she said, but essentially what it came down to is that Biko provided a vessel for Angel to express a lot of frustration that she had with her own paternal situation, her own familial situation, and it really did come to life in that moment. I mean, those tears were not fake tears. She did that every time. She's so talented, but she just really put herself in it, and a lot of the character was informed by Drea, and a lot of Angel's experience was informed by Drea, so it was kind of a twofold thing. Uh, or did I say, I meant to say a lot of the characters informed by Angel and a lot of Angel's experience was informed by Drea, is what I meant to say. But um, yeah, so working with Angel was truly a dream. Like she really just shaped it. I had a vision in mind and I had about 70% done, and she came in with another 70. She exceeded expectation, so it was really, really great working with her for sure.
Yeah, no, I love the Angel's performance because it's very nuanced, and like there's moments like where they're like, again, like, because the character is always moving through the spaces, like they're not completely settled in every space because they just feel very uncomfortable. So like
Mm-hmm.
Angel does, I think, a really good job of like getting that out through the screen, and it's not all about facial acting, as people call it. It's not all face acting, it's just in the way
Mm-hmm.
they hold their body, and like, oh, you just like shift and hold your arms and say, what the heck is going on? Why are
Yeah.
people all up in my space?
Well, that's another thing too. I should have mentioned that in writing, Dre was a little more passive, and Angel's just not passive. Angel's cool and very chill, but not
Mm-hmm.
passive. They will speak up, and
Yeah.
they brought a lot of like I hate to use the word sass because it's more than that, but it was just like they brought a lot of fire to the character. They brought a lot of like grit to Drea. So I was really appreciative of that because it made it funnier sometimes, like when certain people would say things to her and Angel would just have like a kind of like a thuggish reaction, like huh, like who are you talking to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was just really fun to watch them do that. So yeah, I appreciated what Angel brought a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and there's another scene that I thought was really interesting, and the thing is like my interpretation of it is slightly different to what you mentioned. Like
Hmm.
when Dre is in the kitchen talking to Aunt Carol, and we said like people can take out the hearing aids when the sound can become overwhelming, or like there may be like picking up feedback or something. But the thing is that I read that scene as with Drea just being fed up and like, I don't want to hear anything you have to say. So I'm
Mm,
gonna take out these hearing aids and I'm gonna put it on because you're not saying anything that I need to hear or I want to hear. You're not,
mm.
it's the slightly less passive way than a child walking out the room. We can't really walk away from our elders because if we do, we get dragged. We talk about being disrespectful and being
Yes, that's
rude
true.
and all
Hmm.
this. So Angel, I saw it as Angel and Dre making the choice to say, okay, I can't walk out the room because if I walk out the room, I'd be seen as extremely disrespectful. So what's the
Yeah,
next best option for me to avoid this conversation? Take my hearing aids
take the
out
hearing
and put
aid
them
out.
down. I
Yeah,
can't listen to you. So so like that's kind of how I read that's a way that I saw the character as being it's showing up a sense of agency, showing like I can
yes.
hear you when I'm ready to, when I can hear you, and then there's moments where I don't have to entertain you. So this is my sense of autonomy
This
as
is
a person.
how I take my autonomy back.
Yeah,
I completely agree with that, and that was utterly an Angel Theory choice. Completely and utterly an Angel Theory choice. And I'll always give that to them because when it happened, I was like, ah, oh, that's so good. Yeah, we have to keep that one. I think I cut there because I was just like, there's really nothing else to shoot after that. Like, Angel has given everything.
mm.
And now here we are in this final moment where she removes her hearing aid and there's
Yeah,
nothing else to be said,
yeah. So
And
I'm
then,
checking out this conversation. I'm like,
yeah. And it's so interesting because Carrie Compere, who played Aunt Carol, in response to that, because I think it was written that Aunt Carol walks out or something like that, and Carrie told me in that moment I wouldn't leave her like that. Like as an auntie, as an elder in her family, I will remind her that I'm still gonna be here for her.
yeah,
So she added that hug in, which I think is just such a complicated moment because of course Angel feels that love, Drea feels that love, but can't receive it in that
yeah.
moment. And that's just a constant conundrum in families. So,
So
yeah,
true. Our families are so complicated. We love them,
they
but then
are. Yeah,
but
we love them, we hate them.
at the
And
same
especially when you
time,
come from bigger ones. I come from a bigger one. I wrote a bigger one, and it is very much like that. It's complicated. It gets complicated, but you love them still. You love them
mhm.
still.
Yeah. And
So,
I want us to, we begin wrapping up, but one of the things I do want to talk about is the relationship between Drea and Biko and working with Drea and Sammy, her dad, and working with
mhm.
Angel and Biko for the scene. Because as I just said, it's the last sequence in the film, and it comes at a moment of not only just silence between them, but it's a moment where Angel is finally away from all the noise of the family, like
Yeah.
around the dancing, like, like laughing, all of this merriment. She can't fully be invested in it for all of these reasons, but also
Hmm.
because she's just not emotionally there because she's missing this person, her grandmother. And so she feels again isolated in that way. She's like, is no one else missing grandma the same way that I'm missing grandma? Everyone is so happy and joyous and I can't get into this. So there's
Yeah.
all of these reasons why Drea feels isolated. But then she goes into the bedroom and like she's touching the paintings and the pictures and looking at all of the records and she puts on the Billie Holiday album and everything. And this is the only time where the film is truly silent, and it's a moment of like with Drea finally processing that her grandmother is gone, like Muriel is gone, like there's no one else here that understood me the way that I am,
Yeah.
and this is again, and this is an interesting choice where Sammy comes in, but then again, like Sammy, like the same way how the camera has been following Drea through the house, Sammy has been following Drea through the house as well, trying to keep his
Hmm.
eye on her. And every time he tries to get close, she either dodges or like the family interrupts and like he can't get in. So that all of these different ways he can't get in, but he's always
Yeah.
watching her, and so like he follows her into the room and I think like he says something very interesting. Like he's been in prison, he's on furlough. So I think that you did that is so lovely is that you show the person that has been away from her the longest is the person that seems to understand her the most now in
The
this.
most.
Now that Muriel is there, he's in a stand-in for a Muriel for her to have another person that understands her. And so he comes in and he's immediately, as you said, meets her in her terms with regards to the sign language. But not only that, he lets Drea know right away, like, I know who you are. I understand your love of music. I understand your love of poetry. And he's like, that's your fire. And he's like, I don't want you to take that fire away. Because if you take that fire away, then that takes my fire away from her, right? You know, he's like, you're my
Mm-hmm.
fire. And I thought it was an interesting thing to have it where the person that you think doesn't understand you or that you wouldn't is the person who gets you. You know,
Yeah.
the person who like fully understands and says like, I like the people that are right next to you sometimes are the people who don't understand you, but the people who
Mm-hmm.
watch you from a distance, they're the ones who, as you would say, can see the forest for the trees. You know, that distance allows you to see way more than
Yeah.
proximity allows, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. You said Muriel is my grandmother's name, so
Mm,
this film is for her, and her spirit is all up and through it, honestly. And that last moment, that is something that my dad has said to me before when I was having my own doubts and insecurities. Um, and another thing he said to me that has really stuck with me, because without expounding upon it too much, that experience of angels is also mine. And another thing he said is, "You are the one thing I got right." You know, so there's a saying that goes, "You're not somebody until you've been loved by somebody."
yeah,
And
that's a song too, I think.
I think so. I think so. But
Yeah, when
um,
somebody loves you, da, 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 da. Yeah, it's a song.
yeah, something like that. But I think a lot of people think of that in a romantic sense.
Oh wait,
You
it's the
know,
song from Toy Story. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
could be. Toy Story is a great movie, and I love
Yeah,
that movie. That's probably why I know. But
yeah.
I think a lot of people think about that in a romantic sense. And I remember thinking of it romantically as well until my father uttered those words to me.
Mm.
And that's when I was like, oh, I have something else to sort of strive for. My existence is somebody's dependent upon my own happiness, in a healthy way. They're not codependent on it, but they believe in me so much that just by believing in me, they're able to go on, especially in an environment like the prison industrial complex, you know? So, yeah, that final scene was cathartic for me in a lot of ways. And it makes me sad that my dad hasn't seen it yet, but he will eventually. And I know in her own way, my grandmother has as well, you know? You said something like Muriel's gone and she has to come to terms with that. And I think sometimes I'm still coming to terms with that. I was really close to my grandmother.
It
Um,
takes years to get it. My grandmother died 20 years ago, and sometimes I swear I can still hear her voice.
I still hear her. I
Her.
still hear her.
So like yeah, no, it takes you like my one of the reasons I love film and TV so much is because of my grandmother. My sister, my twin sister, and I we go and spend the
Hmm.
weekends by our grandmother, and we are and watch TV all day long. And sometimes during after school, when our mom would pick us up after school, we go be by our grandmother, and we'd be watching Days of Our Lives. You know, like watching soap
Hmm.
operas was our thing. You know, so
Yeah.
like one of the reasons I love film so much is because of my grandma. So I completely relate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear that because it served as a cathartic experience for me. And that was enough. And so to have all this come from it, South by and Chicago and the Oscar qualification and all of that, it's it's more than I asked for. I know she's up there working on my behalf, because that is really a beautiful thing. But I revisited the film in preparation for these interviews, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. So I'm really, really, really happy that people are enjoying it the way that we did in making it.
Mm. And
Yeah.
you should be proud. I think it's a great film, and it's a film that, again, like I think, as you said, like Black people would see so much in, but not only just Black people, but people who are disabled,
Yeah.
and who have like get frustrated with their families when you want your families to just listen to you and to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention, and as you
Mm-hmm.
said, meet you where you are at with your disability in particular. So people, I think, from like various demographics would definitely relate to that, and
Mm-hmm.
and so I love films like this, like where there's so many one element can mean so many different things depending on your
Yeah.
perspective and your
Well, you're reminding
experience.
me, honestly, some of these things I forgot about until you said, and I'm like, oh, that's so right. Like it's like very true that that was an intention I had maybe in writing, and then something came about while we were shooting, and then something came about during the editing process, during the sound design. Like there were all these elements that made themselves apparent depending on who was experiencing the piece in that moment and saying something to me. And I'd be like, that's true. That's true. Actually, let's shape it this way and let's make it that. So all these different experiences shape that movie. And yeah, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our team. I am.
Yeah. And as one, I think the last question I do want to ask you is about casting. So we just talk about your experience of casting, just for like young filmmakers like yourself who would like watch this or listen to the podcast and want to figure out
Sure.
like, how does casting, especially for independent short films, work. Especially in Hollywood as it is right now. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Hollywood is not where Hollywood was 10 years or 5 years ago. It's a completely
No, yeah,
different
and
place
it will never be the same. In regards to that, embrace the change, work
now.
with the change. Don't be afraid of the change. We're young for a reason. We've got time to be in this industry. Let's take it and make it ours. And I'm not afraid of change. It can be scary. It can be unsure. No, the future is unknowable, but I embrace the windfalls and the peaks and the valleys, everything. I try to embrace it all, and I would encourage other young filmmakers to do that too. That's the cool thing about our industry is like, or even filmmaking in general. It's just like you can make something out of nothing. That's our skill set. So let's apply that to every facet of our lives. And in terms of casting, I found everybody in this film because either I had worked with them, I had acted with them, I performed with them, or I acted or knew an actor who knew them, or I saw them in theater. So it was a matter of reaching out to people and pulling on friendships and relationships I had already established to find the people for this role. I didn't hit anything like Actors Access or anything like that. There was no casting call. I knew Carrie and Biko were the people I had in mind, and I'm so lucky I got them both because they were the people I wrote it for. And Drea, I just pictured a faceless body, and Angel came and filled that face. And everybody else in the film, some of the family members are my actual family members, and then also a lot of them, the uncle who's signing to her, that's an old theater teacher of mine. Love you, shout out Corey Mitchell. And then everybody else were, the two aunties and a lot of the cousins and things like that. Those were actors that I know, friends I've had, people I've went to high school with, like actors I've worked with, actors I've seen, So yeah, I just pulled on relationships that I already established, and I'm glad everybody's a part of it. It's so cool. We're all going to South by together. It's just like very exciting. So
No, I'm glad that you guys are gonna go. I haven't gotten the chance to go to South by Southwest yet. I've been to
yeah, me either.
Sundance.
I'm so excited. I really am.
Yeah, let me see. Is it gonna be cool? No, is it gonna be cool? It's gonna be warm.
Warm. It was
It
85.
would
Well,
be
it can
warm.
be either way, but it was 85 degrees last week. They said we had
Yeah.
orientation last night. So
Hopefully it'll be warmer by the time you guys go, because going to a
oh,
film
I
festival
hope.
in winter can
I
be
hope. Yeah. Look, I want it to feel like your background right now.
by the beach. I wish I was
Yes.
by the beach too.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I want it to feel like. So I'm hoping for some heat out there as well.
I hope
Yeah.
so too. Thank you so much, Mekhai, for joining me, and thank you so much for this film. And congratulations to everyone, to
Thank
Angel,
you.
Biko, Carrie. Carrie is my
Yes.
nickname too, so yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're really excited, and let us know when we can watch this so I can send it to everybody. We spoke so well of them. I want them to hear it.
Oh, for sure. Because it'll be my YouTube channel. I'll send Anthony the links and he'll send them to you. But also, I did go on your Instagram page, so I'll be tagging you because I also make
Okay,
posts on
cool.
my social media. So I'll be tagging you there as well. So
Amazing.
please do
Amazing.
feel free to share.
I will. I will share it. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good evening.